Hello everyone, this is Robert and this is the Artillery Sidewinder X2 3D printer. This was provided to me by Made the Best for review, and I spent a few weeks with it now, so I'm going to give you my impressions in this video. I'm kind of breaking this printer down into 5 major categories. We've got ease of use, flexibility, print quality, user experience, and finally value, and then we'll kind of add all those up and give it a final score. So let's dive straight into a brief overview of the printer itself. As I said in the intro, this printer was provided to me by Made the Best for this review, and there are some affiliate links down below that give me a commission and a kickback. However, they had no say in making of this video whatsoever. They didn't tell me what to say or what the format is. All that being said, let's talk about this printer. This is a slightly larger format printer. It's got a 300mm by 300mm by 400mm build volume, which is actually pretty large. It's quite a bit larger than your standard printer. It has a direct drive extruder, we've got the filament sensor, we've got a touch probe, and then even has a volcano style extruder. It's not an actual E3D volcano, but it is similar, and I'm to understand that you can use volcano nozzles in this. So it is made to be a larger format printer, and it has a couple little bells and whistles, like it's got a touch screen, and you know, fit and finish is overall pretty good, and it even has the dual Z drive, and you know, just some nice little pieces of fit and finish. And I'll get into this in more detail when I actually review the printer. This is sitting around $450, give or take, depending on the week and the month, but that's about what it retails for. So let's dive straight into ease of use. So what I'm trying to do is boil a 3D printer down into 5 basic categories, give them a ranking, and then kind of give it an overall score. The first one of these categories is ease of use. Ease of use encompasses everything that is from when you get the printer in the box to getting that first print. You know, can you give this to your grandma? Can you give this to a friend that's never done 3D printing before? That's the kind of focus of this category. And with the Sidewinder X2, I kind of found it to be a little bit below average. The manual really isn't that great. The documentation is a little bit lacking. There's no real good print profiles other than the included ones for Cure, which are meh, just okay. If I was keeping this as my long-term printer, I would definitely create my own print profiles. I did a little bit of looking online and people are selling some, which just kind of goes to show you the level of support for a beginner. This is not what I would consider a beginner printer. It's missing a lot of those new little bells and whistles that some of the newer printers have. For instance, some sort of walkthrough guide on how to set the first layer. It does a nice little bed leveling, but when you're done, you just kind of start your first print. And it took me, you know, a few prints to get that first layer adjusted properly. And something like the Prusa will do this with the little zigzag test where you adjust the live Z. This has a lot of interface problems, which I'll get to later, that make that kind of complicated. So this is definitely below average in terms of beginner friendly. And I'm giving that a 4 out of 10. So this next category I'm calling flexibility. You could think of flexibility like features, but they didn't want to include features because features could benefit build quality, ease of use, user experience, and other things. So I want to focus on just how flexible the printer is. How big of a thing can you print? What kind of filaments can you use? Things like that. This printer is pretty much right at average. I think it might even be slightly below average, but I'm giving it a 5. Here's the reason why. It does have a relatively large build volume, but you're pretty much limited to PETG, PLA, and your standard filaments because it does not have an all-metal hot end, it does not have a hardened nozzle, it doesn't have a tool changer, it also doesn't have a removable bed, so if there's a new hot filament that's out that needs a special type of bed material, you just gotta kind of clip that on. So because of that, I'm giving this a 5. It just basically has the large volume going for it, but then everything else it's kind of missing. No tool changer, no dual heads, no IDEX, none of that fancy stuff, just the basic printer with a slightly larger build volume, and you're gonna have to do some modifications if you want to use anything exotic or out of the ordinary. So I'm calling this next category user experience. You could kind of think of this as quality of life. Like, we don't actually need bed leveling to get a good quality print, but it makes life a lot easier. So that's kind of what is encompassed in this category. This printer has a few decent quality of life things. It has the filament runout sensor. It's got the auto power off thing to where it will kind of reset the head so you can power it back on and resume a print. That's kind of nice. It's got a USB. It's got the two USB sticks over there, like micro SD and then the USB card socket. It has a lot of little nice quality of life features and also the probe. However, the interface is just horrible. I'm going to do a little segment just on the interface after I get done talking here, but the interface is just terrible, just awful, and it gets a whole negative point just for that interface. The rest of the quality of life stuff is nice. The extruder is easy to work on. I had like, a jam because I was using a really crappy filament, and it's really easy to get stuff out of there. Quality of life overall is slightly above average, but it's knocked way down by the interface. So let's talk about the interface real quick. So here is the touchscreen interface for the Sidewinder X2. This is what it looks like when it is printing. You can't really do a whole lot from this screen. We have to go into options for everything, and this is kind of the layout. What's really interesting is pause and stop, cool, preheat. I don't really know why you would need to preheat while it's going. Filament change, cool. Most everything is in more, so we'll go into more, and this is all you can do when the thing is running. I kid you not, this is all you can adjust. We can turn on and off the little light that's on the extruder head, which is kind of a nice little feature. We can change the fan and the speed, which is kind of strange. I don't know anyone that's ever changed the fan, the cooling layer fan, on the fly. That seems a little bit strange to me, but you can do it through this weird little interface. Every single one of these screens has the same interface. So let's say we just want to change the feed rate. We just want to speed this up a little bit. We can go into here, and on the left-hand side, just think about this, on the left-hand side we can make it go faster, and on the right-hand side we can decrement, add, decrement. I don't know why they're on those sides. The interface is really, really strange. The other thing here is we can, like, I don't know, move the extruder. That seems odd to me. And then you can change, the size that you're choosing it. None of this really makes sense to me. I don't know why when you're printing you would need to have this 1, 5, or 10, and why you would want to move the extruder. Who knows? Go back. This is the thing that really got me when I was setting it up initially. This is the live adjust for the Z. You can press this, and it does do something, but there's no indication on what it was previously, what it moved to, and there's no save. So you just kind of press this on your first layer, and then, I don't know, just go back. It's very odd. I don't understand why they couldn't just give you a readout, why they couldn't give you some sort of value or make this on a separate screen. Really not very intuitive. You just kind of gotta hit this until it, I guess, looks good. And that's about it. I mean, obviously you can, oh, oops, I hit change filament, now it stopped. I guess we'll just resume. So it's just a weird menu, and I'm one menu deep in and that actually stops it, so that's kind of odd. The menu is just strange. I don't want to make this a whole 20-minute long video just about the weirdnesses of this. You can also see that it severely truncates the file names, and when you're doing all the files on a USB stick, it shows them in a really weird arrangement. You have to like scroll through it. I think it only shows like 4 at a time. The interface is just near useless, and even when you're using Octoprint, you'd still kind of have to use this for a few things. So the interface is a huge, huge negative for me. So overall, for user experience, the actual printer itself is pretty decent. It has a lot of the little things that you would like to see, but the interface definitely drops it down a little bit. The interface is really, really bad. For instance, if you just want to preheat for PLA, you got to go into the main menu, click on Tools. Now there's a set button, and you might think that you're setting the temperature of the extruder. Oh, no, no, no. You'd be wrong. You're not going to set anything. The set is, I forget what's even in the set menu. You got to go into a Tools menu, then do the extruder, and then in 10-degree increments get it up to 200. Really strange stuff. So the interface is just fundamentally bad, in my opinion. And then these spring turn things for leveling the bed, I would really love it if these just went away completely. They're usable, but think about this. Think about printing the full build volume. Think about just printing a big old cube or, you know, one of those big castle things and then prying it off this glass bed. And you tell me that that's not going to adjust the level of the bed. It is. It's going to screw up the bed leveling because this thing is spring loaded. You're going to mess with something, and these little turn knobs, I hate these things. I absolutely hate these things. So 4 out of 10 for user experience. So the thing that we all care about, print quality. How is the print quality? The print quality on the X2 is actually very, very good. I don't know if you're seeing this, but this looks really, really nice. What I've done is I took my 2 printers that I have in my house, Prusa Mini and Mark III's, and I did 4 different test prints with all of them using the exact same filament, dried, all that good stuff, standard profiles. So I tried to get as equal comparison as I could, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some close-ups between the 3. Spoiler alert, the Mark III's is the best, I think. The Mini is slightly behind that. They're very subtly different, and then the Sidewinder comes in 3rd place, but it's very, very close. So let's go take a look at these prints, and I'll show you the differences between the 2. So of course the Benchy is one of my first benchmark prints. We've got the Mini, the Mark III's, and then the Sidewinder over here. And there's really not that much difference between them. I think both of the Prusa prints just overall look a little bit cleaner. You can kind of see some zits, a little bit of banding going on, and it's just not overall as clean as the other 2, but it's very, very close. And I'm not going to go into that much detail because really on camera, very little difference shows up between these 3. So let's move on to the next print. Next print we have is this Matter Hackers Astronaut. I've still got in the same order, Mini, Mark III's, and Sidewinder X2. And both of the Prusas are really nice. The feet turned out great. We've got a little bit of overhang in the gloves here, and it's just a really, really solid print. So let's look at the X2. It looks close. Once again, very, very close. I think the main difference between these is the slicer profile just isn't as good on the X2. We're getting a lot more zits. We're getting a lot of stuff that, quite frankly, the Prusa slicer just kind of gets rid of. So we're not seeing the level of quality. I mean, it's very, very close, but these 2 just look a little bit better, and I think that's mostly due to slicer settings. But if we look at kind of the helmet, you can definitely see a little bit of banding, a little bit of zits. But if we look at like the Mini, for instance, it's almost perfect. So now let's do something a little bit more complicated. This is a 3D printer test from Thingiverse, and you can see, let's look at the text first. This is the Mini, Mark III's, and the Sidewinder. If we look at the text and on this overhang, very crisp, very readable, same with the Mark III. In person, these are a little bit different. The Mark III's still just looks a little bit better. And then if we look at the Sidewinder in comparison, it's a little bit fuzzy in places, and I don't know if this is going to show up, but there's just a little bit more goobers and stuff like that inside the text. You just can't read it as well. But if we flip around to the back side, let me just pick the Mark III, look at these little towers. They are almost perfect on the Mark III. There's just a little bit of blobbing, a tiny bit of stringing. And if we look over at the X2, they're a little bit kind of wobbly and blobby, and there's quite a bit more stringing. Once again, exact same filament, dried ahead of time, same roll, same everything. And if we look at the overhangs, this is hard to show on camera, there's a little bit of sagging on these overhangs, whereas with the Mark III's, we've got almost no sagging whatsoever. Overall, the Mark III and the Prusa Mini just look pretty close to perfect. You can also see through here versus through here. It just kind of gets a little away from it, just a little bit. Now, interesting thing is the overhangs, I think the Sidewinder did a little bit better job of the overhangs. They're not as crisp in the lead up, but definitely have a lot less gunk on the underside than the Prussias. The Prussias are definitely, one of their strong suits is not doing these overhangs. They don't really have a good part cooling fan. So yeah, I think they're all very close. I would say if I had to score these, they're within like a half a point of each other. You know, looking at these in person, the Sidewinder is definitely in third place, the Mini is in second, and the Prusa Mark III S is in first, but very, very close. Let's look at the last one. So this is the Maker's Muse clearance tower test, and it has a lot of various features in it. So I'm just going to kind of breeze over a few of them. Once again, Mini, Mark III S, and Sidewinder X2. First up, let's look at the gates. This is an unsupported area at the top of the gate. The Mini did it all right. The Mark III S did it about the same, maybe slightly worse. And the X2 did the worst by far. There was actually a couple strings hanging off of this that I had to chip away. It also doesn't really go back into place as well. This is a print in place which also has a few moving pieces, most notably this castle. On the Mini, it works okay. It's pretty free and it takes a little bit of work to get it out, but generally speaking, you know, it's free spinning. The Mark III S is, I printed it first on this printer, and quite frankly, I didn't understand if I did this right because it just spins really free, and it's just incredibly smooth and feels fantastic. Now on the Sidewinder, it kind of gets bound up and it's very rough. This is not something that you would really want to fidget with. It's extremely rough and just doesn't feel great. It's got a little bit of play and it's loose, but it's just, you know, like I said, really rough, and it just kind of feels like it binds up. In addition, we can lift up this little, let me see if I can get it there, geez. We can lift this up and we can see quite a bit of ringing and ghosting in the text here. If we look over at the Prusa, a little bit less. So generally speaking, the Sidewinder has a little bit more ringing, doesn't have as good a tolerances, and at least in this doesn't do overhangs quite as well. Everything else is pretty decent. It looks really detailed, it looks really nice, but it just kind of got beat out by the other Prusias in terms of overall nitpicky quality. So this is the vase that I was printing during this whole video, and it turned out fantastic. There's a little bit of a line right here, and that's most likely when I was messing with the interface and paused it because it was about right at that point. If we can get this off easily. It's the downside to these non-flexible build materials. There's not really a great way to get this off. There we go. So yeah, there is the print quality. It's very, very good. I actually printed this specifically to see if I was getting any Z-banding, and I'm not seeing a whole lot. You can see there's that line right there, and that was me. That wasn't the printer. So overall, really, really nice. So I'd say overall print quality lags slightly behind the Prusa Mark III S and the Prusa Mini. It's very close to the Mini, but once you start looking at details, things like that, it lags a little bit behind. The other thing I should point out is all of this is done with the standard 0.2mm profiles. And I did that because you can spend an infinite amount of time tweaking the profiles and getting things a little bit better. But I wanted to show you exactly how you would use it if you just use the defaults right out of the box. And that's kind of where the comparison comes from. Additionally, the other thing that I should note about print quality is the default profiles were significantly slower on this machine than the Prusa slicer that I have inside. In some cases, it was taking 25 to 30% longer for this to finish just based on those profiles. So that's another reason for the ding in the quality scores. This was printing a lot slower. If I was to print the other one's a lot slower, you'd see probably a larger gap in that. So just take that into account. So the last category is value. Now the way I calculate value is based on a $0 to $2,500 range, because that is about the range of most hobbyist level 3D printers. They are bounded by 0 and 10, so you can't go higher than 10, you can't go lower than 0, and then it is weighted based on the score that it gets in the previous 4 categories. So that comes out to a value rating of 8.59, and I think that's pretty accurate. This is a relatively high value printer. For a large format printer at $450, you're getting almost the same level of print quality that you would at the $1,000 Mark III's, so I think it poses a pretty high value proposition. The biggest things that it suffers from is the interface and just some of the little fiddly stuff, but if you're not new to 3D printing, this isn't going to be an issue whatsoever. If you care about just sheer print volume and print quality, this is a pretty high value for that. So if you're anything like me, you click on one of these videos and you scan all the way to the chapter that says conclusion and figure out what the conclusion is. This gets 57 out of 100 according to my somewhat arbitrary scale. It suffers from ease of use, just not being very intuitive, the interface, things like that, but that might not be that important to you. If this is not your first 3D printer and you're just looking to add a large format printer, maybe you're going to upgrade it with an all-metal hot end, things like that, to do nylons. It is a fantastic printer. The fact that you can come very close to the Prusa Mark III's in terms of print quality for the price and for the build volume says a lot about this printer. I really like it for the print quality. The other thing that I never mentioned here is it's actually oddly quiet. It was printing this, well, most of the time I was doing this video, and you could barely hear it. I didn't do any noise reduction in camera. So it is a relatively quiet, well put together printer. There's a lot of videos out there that will talk about some of the little fit and finish details, and I didn't want to make this a 45-minute video. But overall, you know, it's an impressive, decent looking printer that is relatively well thought out, that gives you good print quality with just an absolute insultingly garbage interface. If you're going to be using this with Octoprint or something, or if this isn't your first printer, those things really don't matter that much. So yeah, that is my 2 cents on the Artillery Sidewinder X2. So that's all I have to talk about with this printer. Check down below for the links for affiliates. If you do want to buy this, I think I have a coupon code down there so you can get a discount on it. No obligation, you do what you want. This video was sponsored by Made the Best, so keep that in mind when making your purchasing decisions. As always, thanks for watching. Check me out in my next video. I'm probably going to be doing this same rubric scoring system for my other printers, my Mini and my Mark III's, because I think it'd be interesting to kind of run them through the process and see where they land up. So be on the lookout for that. And as always, thanks for watching. See you in the next video.